been on another mission into space.
We're having a second look at Rogue Angels, Legacy of the Burning Suns by Sun Tzu Games.
Hi, I'm Libby, this is Julian, and together we are BoxedMeeples, and we are taking a second look at another game. This is a game that we looked at probably maybe 18 months or so ago. We did a 5 reasons you might like about when it was first going to Kickstarter, and then it since has stopped that campaign, relaunched and funded on Kickstarter, and is going to be going out to people. And we had the copy again, the sort of revived, refreshed version, so we're going to have a look again and talk about what's in Rogue Angels now.
So if you don't know what Rogue Angels is, this is a space-based dungeon crawler that's actually inspired by old video games, particularly the Mass Effect games. So in this game you're going to be playing through a very long campaign. There's 70 different missions you can play. You're going to be playing at least 40 of those, and as you progress through each of the individual, you're going to be making moral decisions as you play. Now this is not only going to sculpt who your characters are, but it's actually going to sculpt which missions you choose. So often you're presented a kind of decision to make, and that will dictate which part of the campaign book you skip to, and therefore which campaign you actually play.
What makes this different is that the focus is on your characters, so it's like a character legacy rather than just the events that happen that would normally happen in some of the other legacy kind of dungeon crawlers we might have played, like Imperial Assault, like Gloomhaven, things like that. It tends to be about, you know, you as a group are going off and you're doing this challenge. That's happening too, but it will be about what things you've looted together and what you've done, and it will be more about the story. Whereas this one, the focus is definitely on the character, and the character is what you're developing, and their choices, their morals, what they're good at, bad at, and the decisions they make around that, which is really interesting.
Yeah, we've seen as we played through a second time through the campaign, we've noticed more that certain decisions, when you start siding with certain characters, you start building a relationship with them at the expense of building a relationship with someone else. And that in turn affects your character card. You start marking off at the bottom of each one which skills you're kind of developing, and that's through those character relationships. And you see not only that having a long-term effect on the story, but an immediate effect on your character. You then get new abilities based on your kind of evolving character as you play, which is a really interesting way of transferring that kind of rogue and paragon dynamic you see in Mass Effect to a board game, because it does mean that a character you start off playing is going to be entirely different for each person who plays with that character. And the characters I find have grown immensely since we first played this.
Well, we purposely chose to pick 2 different characters than the ones we chose initially when we first looked at the game. A, because there was more to choose from, and B, because why not do something a bit different? And it was interesting to see that there was much more backstory, much more information on where they've come from, what they've been through, why they might be good at one certain sort of personality trait over another. I mean, I had one that was a bit of a loner, also quite good at blowing things up, but you know, that meant that, do they really care about what happens about overspill on the old fire? Whereas yours was much more of a team player. And,
yeah.
And it's interesting to have those combinations of characters and know why they've gotten how they have.
More so this time, I had a very kind of noble character this time. And I was concentrating more on the decisions they would make. And sometimes it's very obvious, you know, are you going to do a really bad thing or are you going to do a good thing? Well, my character would have done the really good thing. It wouldn't have done the bad thing. So it felt...
Mine might have.
Yours might have. I think it's really interesting having come back to this game from sort of 18 months ago, because the game hasn't changed a great deal.
No, it's more polished.
Certainly.
Absolutely. There's more campaign maps and books. There's more story put in, but the base mechanics of it were solid already, and they're still there.
I'm really pleased it hasn't changed those, because all the things we really loved about it last time are still here. But the funny thing is, we've changed as players.
Yes, yeah.
So since we've played Rogue Angels for the first time, we've played through all of Jaws of the Lion. We played other similar games. At that point we played through Imperial Assault, but we hadn't played as many of these kind of dungeon crawler games. And also, if you watch our video back, we hadn't seen the kind of cooldown track in this way at all. And now we've seen this a lot more in
Yeah.
other games.
I was aware that it was in some games, but hadn't played them. It was, I think, a complete surprise to you to have that as a mechanism where you're putting cards at a certain sort of value action and you're waiting for them to come back down as you time ticks along and takes turns. And obviously, the good beefy cards that do all the good blowing up are quite high valued, and then the sort of little skip across a couple of squares or just interact with something are really low value, and you can use them again. And yeah, we've played a load of games with those in Ark
Ark
Nova,
Nova's the obvious one,
Civilization,
yeah.
Animated has that in it, quite a few now, so we're very familiar with that. So it feels, it's strange to return to something that was like, oh, really enjoying this, and then have done that so much in this sort of last year that it now feels so familiar
Yeah,
to return to
it
that
doesn't seem
mechanism.
as surprising as original as it did to me back then. But it's still amazing how well it does work in these games. And having
Yeah.
said we've played through different kind of these style dungeon crawler games, you start seeing the beauty of some of the mechanics that the designer Emil Larson has come up with
Mm-hmm.
that just work so neatly, so elegantly in Rogue Angels. For
The
example,
fact that the wounds fit into that track
yeah,
and fill those spaces up, that you might have to then play a good card even higher than it would normally be, and things like that. That's really
but
interesting.
everything is there's no kind of second board where you need to mark things off or sheet character sheets or anything like that. It's all kind of in front of you, immersed on your board. And yeah, you don't realise, or I hadn't realised at the time, just how clever that is in the way the enemies behave. I've played games since playing Rogue Angels where you then have to refer back to another book to see about those enemy behaviours, and then that didn't work as well with the kind of shift you get in the enemy behaviours you get in Rogue Angels.
Hmm.
This is right in front of you. And having got more experience in playing these games, we've now learned to take advantage of the flipping mechanism you get with the cards. How, you have red characters behave, then yellow characters behave, which gives you a sneaky opportunity to
Hmm.
get in there when the yellows are going to be dormant. And we've started, I think when we first played it, we were less aware of that kind of level of play. We would play it kind of almost, well, I certainly would play it very surface level.
I love that that's just so simple and on the table in terms of those characters, of the enemies, and there's such more of an array of them. I think we did use a couple of different types the first time around, but now there's so many different ones. They all have different strengths and weaknesses for some of the different stories that they'll be coming up in, and I'm sure maybe there might even be even more at the finished production part, because this is obviously enough to take us through to X number of
Yeah.
chapters.
So we know there's going to be 3 campaign books. That's clear on
Mhm.
the Kickstarter. We've got, I think, half of one. So it's going to get, this game's going to be huge. And I think it needs to be because with those campaign books, the larger they are, the more decisions they're going to be.
Mm.
And it's such an impressive design process that he can keep track of all of those different decisions and keep it cohesive. And we've seen how certain characters aren't going to be present in certain missions if you don't make actions early. I'm trying not to.
No
I'm trying
spoilers.
to pace around being giving up any details of why. But that's just it's such an achievement that makes sense and is playable within the book.
Yeah, and I very much am assuming that you're going to get story arcs, and then at some point they sort of converge, and everyone's vaguely at a very similar point at some point, no matter what, and then it kind of arcs again. But it's about the journey, it's about all of those stories and how your characters particularly are developing, rather than the thread of the missions and things. So I think every experience is going to be a bit different.
Now, one thing we did differently this time that we didn't do before was play it on a bigger player count. So we had 4 of us gathering town to play an event, and what worked quite well was them dropping into a mission in that. Then it got really exciting when we were
Mm.
playing that because then the commander role really had to kind of up their game and make sure that people were doing certain objectives because the timer for the missions was so much shorter.
Yeah, I mean the timer just does keep you on your toes, and I think it eases you in early doors. And one of the things that I've really liked about this game is how it is so easy to just pick up and get going. It eases you in with the first couple of missions in terms of how you play, and it's gentle with you for the timer to start with. And then as you've picked up the game and you've picked up all the mechanisms, it just picks it up a bit and
Hmm.
makes it that little bit trickier.
But yeah, it was accessible to people who played these kind of games a lot.
Yeah.
They got it quite quickly. But amongst our group was someone who'd never played any of these kind of games, but was very excited by the kind of the setting, the story of it all. And I was impressed at how quickly they could kind of slot into it and quite quickly start making those decisions. Obviously, we're helping them along and steering them with kind of, you can do this or this or this. But then by the end of it, they were very much taking ownership of their character and saying, well, I'm more likely to be going to be doing that. And I do like, I still love the way the missions do evolve as you play.
Yeah.
I think that's so good. And in our earlier video, we talked about the beauty of the map book. And it's not a case of finding all the little map pieces that fit together that you see in some of the other campaign games. You just have the book and you flip it over. And then because it's in a book, it's very simple then flick it to the next page and see the maps evolved and changed. And I can't see of another way they could have done this. And it's worked so, so well.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen this in so like the Gloomhavens, Jaws of the Lion, things like that recently.
Sleeping Gods has it.
And they've both done it very well. And I think taking that and moving and progressing with that style is just the way to go with these kind of games, because no one has the time, and it gets the game to the table more often, more quickly, because you can just open up the book, right, okay, we need 3 doors, 3 things, these enemies, ready to go, let's play. And what I do really like is how each sort of scenario is broken up into several little chapters of games, and I think they're short enough that it's quite easy to play through the whole section as one, but you're doing like several little missions within the one thing, and I quite enjoy that. The maps are changing, it's like, oh, go and interact with this computer, don't alert the guards, kind of thing might be your thing that you've got to do. And then once you've done that, it's like, oh, well done, you've interacted with the thing, now off to this map, and now you've got to go and do this. And that has this arching story within several little moving missions, and I like the pace of that compared to having one map for the whole, maybe
It's in 3 hours on the same thing. And
I mean, we've played quite all the way through Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, and we will be on one map the whole evening. And some of the games, depending on, some of them are much shorter, but some of them are 2-3 hours, and you are on that one map trying to do that one thing. And I like this change of pace and the story within it. Do this, do that, kind of chopping through into these things. And it does mean that if you do need to cut an evening short, you can stop somewhere and re-pick up and just the tail end of it. But of course, I think that they are manageable to do them in one chunk and just keep it moving.
And surprising, the decisions you make and the way the maps evolve. We've obviously played deeper into the game now, and I was surprised. I was genuinely surprised by some of the things that happened, and I just wasn't expecting to be there. And I like to be surprised in these kind of things. I think that's very exciting.
Yeah, I like there's options that, we're not obviously going to not give too much away, but there might be people that are coming to join you on the crew. You might be sort of interacting more with people on different places. Your choices might dictate where you go to in terms of traveling to different worlds and all sorts of different things. And it's just a lovely story that makes sense as it's going along.
Now, I must confess, when this didn't reach, when it did reach a kind of fully fleshed out final version in the last campaign, I was absolutely gutted because I really enjoyed playing this the first time. But perhaps this has been to its benefit, because now the version that's on Kickstarter looks absolutely incredible. So now we have the miniatures are just going to add so much to this game, and it just feels it's got a chance to grow, to evolve, and to really find its feet. And I think that's going to make it, as a result, such a better game.
Everything that was great about it, all of those mechanisms that work so well together, all of that idea of the story and the development and that kind of Mass Effect feel of it, which you certainly know more about than I do, were all there from the get-go. This has just had a bit more time to sort of settle in and consolidate different bits, polish off a few bits and bobs, and is really honed in on everything. And it's a really great game. If you're into any of those Gloomhavens, Imperial Assaults, like any of that kind of thing, but you like that space setting, you like the idea of stories and characters that are going on these missions, this game is definitely one to check out.
Such simple but clever mechanisms that go into it, like the hacking is so fun. Love that. I forgot how much I enjoyed
Oh,
that
it
tension of
just
hacking. But you don't kind of feel that in many of these similar games. It's that it takes so many mechanisms I love from other board games. That bag drawing thing. I forgot how much I enjoyed that.
yeah, the sort of the drama and tension of, are you going to pull out the things that you need for this, or and knowing that the enemy is going to have another turn after this,
Hmm.
and if they hit you again you're going to be in a precarious situation, so you're kind of needing to pull now, and your allies are somewhere across board, so you've got to get all the way back round to your turn again alive before you're going to get a chance to do that again, which will probably be the last action to sort of complete that particular
Hmm.
mission. It does put you in those precarious, like, tension,
Speaking
like,
from experience here.
no, I mean, can you tell? Yeah, you have that tension of, oh my gosh, please be another red.
So once again, this was a case of going back to a game we hadn't played for a while, and
Mm,
I just forgot how great this is.
yeah, yeah.
I remember it being good. I didn't appreciate just how fantastic it really is.
Yeah, and it's unusual for us to do a second look on one that is not actually out yet. This is a
Hmm.
second prototype, so please do remember that the things that you've seen throughout the video have still been prototypes, and the finished game will be coming later. But we just felt that because it had been quite a while, you'd had the second campaign, it's worth revisiting
Yeah.
it, seeing how it's changed, and seeing if you guys are interested in that, keeping an eye on one, really.
Yeah, so if you are interested, there's a link to the Kickstarter down below. It's funded now. We know it's going to happen, which is a big relief to me because I want to play more of this game. I want to see the final version and I
Mm,
want it on our shelf so we can share it with so many people. It's still in the process of funding, so if you are interested, go and back it now. And if you're watching this at a later date, I'm sure there'll be a backer kit you can get involved with if you've
yeah.
missed out on this. But like you said, if you like those kind of games and you like space and you like Mass Effect, you like those moral decision games, this is one you want to keep an eye on.
Yes.
And if you are new to us, we are Julian and Libby, and we post at least 2 board games videos a week right here on YouTube. So if that's your kind of thing, do subscribe to us and let us know in the comments down below if you're aware of Rogue Angels before, if you're finding out for the first time, or if you're just like us, really excited by the fact that this is now going to become a thing.
Yeah. And don't forget that we have the link for our original 5 things you might like about, which tells you maybe a little bit more details about the game, so that might be of interest to you too. But for now, we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for watching.
Bye.